Hey, we're back with part 2 of Principles of Design. So we're going to hop into the other 3 principles of design today and round out this Principles of Design series. You're listening to Marketing Adventure, the hub for business, fashion, marketing, and other CTE educators who integrate marketing into the learning experience. I'm your host, Jackie Walker. Each week, I'll cover marketing education concepts, strategies, tips, trends, frameworks, and other information to equip you to connect your classroom to digital natives while cultivating an engaged learning environment. So come on into the room where your favorite beverage, snacks, and even your cell phone are all welcome. The first principle of design, which is the 4th one in this whole series that I've been talking about. Previously, we talked about balance, and then we talked about emphasis and proportion. So the first one we're going to talk about today is contrast. Now, contrast is said to be the automatic principle. And why is that? It's because it is basically when items are opposite one another, and that could be contrast in size, contrast in colors, contrast in whatever elements are being used in the fashion item. So could be black and white. It could be big design, small design. It's just a contrast that is created when you put these different elements together. So contrast is also said to be used when you really want to draw the focal point to a particular area of a design, kind of like emphasis or even proportion. But all of these work in their own unique ways as a part of design. Other ways you can think of contrast being used is in texture. Sometimes you'll have something that's smooth and shiny up against something that is more rough and textured like corduroy. So you're creating contrast in that particular fashion item by having a soft, smooth material next to a material that is more rough and textured and more, where you can actually feel the texture in there. So, and they look like they wouldn't really go together because one is hard and one is soft, but you're creating this contrast in the items, which gives it its own particular style and flair. So contrast overall is just used for emphasis. It's used for to create a focal point. It's used to give some element of surprise in the design. It's just used in various ways in fashion. All right. Rhythm is our next principle of design that I'm going to be talking about today. Now, rhythm has 4 different types to it. So this is going to be a little bit longer than the other principles. Rhythm, as you can gather, when you think about rhythm, you think about something that has a constant, when you think about music, a beat, like it has a constant beat that sounds a certain way. It creates that rhythm that brings the music together and make it cohesive. Now, when we talk about rhythm as a part of design, as a principle of design, we're looking at the recurrence or the repetition of one or more elements within a visual format that creates harmony. And with that in mind, we're looking at, that element that will make a pleasing arrangement with the particular fashion or style that you're creating. And you may look at this in textile, for instance, because it starts with textile, and textile can be print. It can be plain, but most times it's print. And within that print, there is some type of rhythm with the pattern that has been created with that textile. So let's get into talking about the 4 different types of rhythm. They are repetition, gradation, radiation, and alternation. So when we talk about repetition, it's simply repeating something over and over again. In boys' clothing, and I'm using this because I have a son and I have a daughter. In boys' clothing, they use repetition in their shirts and in anything that they have for boys outside of like the characters and the trucks and all the sports icons that they have on the boys' clothing. When I looked at little boys' clothing, all I would see is striped shirts. It would be all different color stripes, or block color stripes, like big block of blue, big block of white, just stripes on the clothes. It's like, can we get some variety in boys' clothing? But that's when I think of repetition, that is what immediately comes to mind is a striped shirt. It's just the repeating of the lines over and over again. And those lines could be any color, or they could be two colors that are just alternating. So that is repetition. You can find repetition with having like polka dots throughout something continuously. And not only does it have to be like a line, it could, like I said, it could be color that's repeated. It could be shapes that are repeated. It could be any of those elements of design that are repeated. So it's just reoccurring. The next type of rhythm is gradation. So gradation can be created by a color being in its pure form and fading out to lighter colors. So you're creating, it's going from one spectrum to another in the colors. So it's fading away. That is gradation. All right. Gradation not only can be used in a color fading to a lighter color, but it also can be used with shapes that are, big and going increasing or decreasing in size. That is considered gradation. It's going from one size or type of thing and either gradually getting smaller or more intense or bigger or less intense. So that is gradation, going from one size or value increasing or decreasing to another. Hey there, here's an overview of what's in the Fashion Marketing Starter Pack. In week 1, the students will talk a little bit about what their fashion sense is. And so they'll do a little activity just introducing themselves. And then they'll have an activity where they get to create a lookbook for a celebrity of their choice. And then in week 2, we're going to get into the fashion weeks. It starts off with New York and ends with Paris. And this is a full month of researching and looking at the Big 4 Fashion Week. Now, we'll also introduce some elements of design, and they will need to use that information in their research on the fashion weeks. Now, the first activity that they're going to have for marketing will be a marketing mix. This is a great time to introduce to students the first concept of marketing. And then in week 3, you will introduce the career project. Now, this project lasts over the whole semester. It allows them to dive into the 4 various levels of the fashion industry to learn about opportunities that are out there. In this week, you will also introduce the principles of design, which will also be used as a part of the Fashion Week's project that they're working on. Then the next marketing concept that you're going to introduce are the 7 functions of marketing. Week 4, they take a dive into learning about the fashion cycle. So they'll learn the 5 phases of the fashion cycle, fads, trends, things of that nature. Then they'll have an activity that they can actually demonstrate their knowledge on about a high profile celebrity. And then they get to learn about the fashion theories. And that will entail a slideshow that they'll get to present to the class at the end. The next marketing concept that they will learn about is market segmentation. And this is an introduction to them learning about target market. In week 5, which is the last week of activities, is going to be a major project learning about the environmental factors, the 4 environmental factors that affect fashion. And that includes the target market and some other factors, but it will be very comprehensive. And then they'll also learn, as far as marketing is concerned, about competition. And this is going to conclude the starter pack for fashion marketing. Don't forget to listen to the Marketing Adventure podcast and connect and be an insider so you can always be in the know. See the link in my show notes for more information about the starter pack. All right. So the third type of rhythm is radiation. And radiation, just think about the sun and how from the sun, the beams and the rays come out from the sun. It creates radiation. Also, I like to use the example of tie-dye. So when you gather some fabric up together, you put the rubber band around it, you tie it all up, and you dip it into the color. You let it soak for a little while, let it dry out. You take that rubber band off, and you have these bursts of colors, and they are a deep color, generally in the center, and they get lighter as they span out because of the way that the design has occurred from it being balled up and bandaged together. So that is what we call radiation. So there's always a focal point, and then there's things that span out from that focal point. I've seen it in fashion where there's a large polka dot, and then it'll have polka dots that start getting smaller and smaller as they go out around in like the shape of, a circle. So that's radiation. Radiation usually has a center and a circular pattern that spurs out from the center. So that's radiation. The fourth and final type of rhythm is alternation. And alternation is from the keyword there, alternate. It alternates various elements. So it could be alternating colors. You may have red, black, or you could be alternating designs. You could have stars, a stripe, stars, a stripe, stars, a stripe. You could be alternating shapes. You can take any of the elements and alternate them to create the principle of rhythm and alternation. Okay, so those are your 4 different types of rhythm. And as I'm saying these, I'm sure that you're thinking of some type of clothing or an item that you have in your wardrobe that has one of these types of rhythm. The final principle of design for our series is movement. Now, you may be thinking, movement as a principle of design with clothing. Of course, we know clothing, it has movement itself. But let's look at other areas of fashion marketing, such as illustration, visual design, displays, merchandising, all of those things that are not necessarily fashion that has fashion in them, but deal with the marketing of fashion. Um, you can create movement in those designs by having elements that make the clothing or objects within that design look as though they're moving. So let's say we're talking about illustration, and in that illustration, maybe you want to give the viewer, whoever is looking at that design, an idea about how that clothing or that material moves when it's live and in person and 3-dimensional. So you may put some marks within that illustration, like some little lines that show that the skirt moves or flows when the person turns. So you can put those little marks and designs that make the item look like it's moving on the paper when it's actually not. You can also do that in visual merchandising. So for instance, a window display, let's say we are doing a fall display or winter display and the mannequins have on jackets and scarves and you're trying to display and give the feeling to the viewer of the environment that someone would wear this coat and scarf and all that in. And you could have the scarf flowing out to the side as if it's being blown by the wind. So you're creating that element of movement within a display when the display is actually not moving. There's no wind blowing or any of those things going on, but you're giving the illusion of movement by the way that you have designed the display and merchandised the items within that display. So movement is a good part of a principle of design because it helps the viewer, the user, or someone who's interested in whatever they're looking at. It gives them an idea of how that object would move in real life. So that concludes my series on principles of design. I hope this has been valuable for you and that you'll be able to use this in your classroom to help your students understand the concepts of principles of design. I thank you for being here with me on Marketing Adventure with Jackie, and I hope that you have a wonderfully blessed day. Thanks for listening to Marketing Adventure. Remember to subscribe, rate, review, and share this episode with someone you think would benefit from the information shared here today. If you have any questions or want to connect with me, find me on Instagram at Marketing Adventure. All links and resources discussed in this episode can be found in the show notes at marketingadventure.com.